All right, well, I have to tell you a little bit. When we started planning Love Local and doing a 30-minute special, it was last fall. And we thought, what a great way to celebrate, hopefully, what was going to be a much more open environment. But nothing shocks anybody anymore, right? So here we are. So let's talk about right now where we're at, and then we'll take a look back over the last 18 months or so in terms of our local businesses and where we're going. So let's talk about, first of all, we just got done with the holiday season. How was the holiday season for our local businesses, speaking of Eastern Washington, and was it what we expected? Can anybody speak to that?
I guess I'll give it a shot. I think that we are up from where we were a year ago, but there are still some segments of our retail and economic activity that are still pretty hard hit by the pandemic, and they have a tougher road, and that would obviously be restaurants and hospitality, performing arts and music, anything in a venue, and to some extent personal services, and childcare has been pretty hard hit as well. So that's what I've observed.
So in looking back, and all agencies involved, looking at some of those hardest hit businesses, populations, it was reactive mode, right? It was getting them some basic emergent needs settled. Then we were moving a little bit in the direction of, okay, let's support them, whether it's grants, whether it's just resources, whatever it can do. Where are we at right now in that process? Are we sort of going back a little bit and saying, okay, I mean, you talk to childcare and they're like, we need tests, we need masks, we need this. Where are we at in that support?
Well, I'll jump in, and then I'm sure that both Lisa and Mark can add on a lot of different perspectives. I think it depends a little bit, actually, even to what Lisa was saying around the sectors most impacted, even coming through the holiday season. Is it still really inconsistent depending on which sector or size of business you're talking about? And there's a lot of competing factors around that. So whether it's the issues, I mean, the workforce challenges for multitudes of reasons are hitting every industry and every size of business. And so that is a challenge that then, flows over into childcare and those kinds of things. You're also seeing it, the supply chain challenges that we're all, and that again varies depending upon industry and sector. So it's kind of this mixed bag. There continues to be certain parts of our economy that are doing well and are holding strong, but there's also pieces that are continuing to struggle to get their way back to whatever back looked like or will look like in this new normal that we're in. And just kind of how do we continue to also have the services that support the different businesses throughout our economy when we're all trying to continue to figure out this ever-changing pandemic that we're in the middle of.
I feel like when I come to work, I'm living in two different universes, right? I come in, we read some numbers, we get an economic forecast, and people have there's some positive things that we need to talk about. There is certainly some gain to where we were backing up a year, 18 months ago. And then we're just flooded with folks struggling, looking for help with businesses. So let's talk about one of the most obvious one right now is labor and shortages. How does GSI, how does Downtown Partnership, how do our local agencies get involved in that, and where do we begin?
I'll start, Mark, jump in. I think, there's a multitude of things, and I think that the workforce and labor shortages are a huge challenge. I think one of the things that we continue to see is that we're lucky that we have a strong state workforce system, a great workforce system through Workforce Spokane to help work both. They have a whole talent solutions piece that works directly with businesses, as well as all of their support services to help those seeking employment today. And so they're very busy and working with more customers than they've seen in years prior. And so there's a lot of that meeting that short-term need. And part of our job in this is helping employers connect to some of these systems that exist. And I think one of the things I comment on a lot right now is I think because of the widespread challenges around labor, we have segments of our business community who aren't used to accessing those services in those systems. And so how, a lot of our conversation is helping connect them to those tools, as well as some of the different programs that are coming down through Commerce and the state and federal funding to support employers in training programs and creating access for their employers. A lot of, our role at GSI is helping ensure that we're getting that information into the hands of those employers that are needing to find people, retrain the people that they have, those kinds of things.
I just piggyback on that and just say our role hasn't traditionally been necessarily at that level. And I think that's something that GSI and certainly Department of Commerce does exceptionally well. However, what we've tried to do is just become really from the beginning is kind of tip everything up on its ear and really become one of those things, just becoming a conduit of information and just making sure that we're paying attention, we're watching multiple sources, and we're sharing that information with our customers, our business customers. But I want to go back real quickly and just I want to touch on something you said, and I think you said it very well, Laura, and that is we're almost in the midst of this. I don't know if it's confusion, but it's an interesting time, right? I think we have some companies. We just saw Starbucks just the other day announce they're not going to require masks. Right. We have our federal government saying, we're distributing 250 million masks, and wear your masks. And I think in addition to that, let's just be honest. I mean, we're in the midst of pandemic fatigue, right? And so out of that, I think what we're seeing is people kind of finding their own way, and I think that's okay. We're paying attention to the information that we find valuable. I know that all of us are doing our best to try to communicate best science and make sure that we're sharing good information. And I think that's very natural. The other thing I just want to add is just kind of echoing what you both said is that our retail market this winter in downtown, which we rely on heavily, was definitely lighter than it was pre-COVID, but stronger than it was last year. But one of the things that I think that we really felt and saw and we continue to see is just what you mentioned a minute ago, Laura, and that's this sense of optimism. I think people are really clamoring for some hope. They're looking for ways to get out of the home, ways that they can get outside, maybe where they can be distanced and they can have experiences and enjoy themselves while keeping safe. And so we're kind of seeing this mixture, right? But underneath it all, I just find that we're finding this sense of optimism and positive, I think, attitude that is really starting to boil up.
I'll add something on the positive side, and that is, I think we strengthened our partnerships during the pandemic. So, for example, Commerce worked with GSI on some of our Working Washington small business grants. We partnered with the Arts Commission on grants to arts organizations and nonprofits, including some here in Spokane, like Terrain and others. And we realized there is a network of entities out there that support small businesses. And no matter what happens, small business is always going to be the foundation of the economy, right? We start lots of small businesses. They don't all make it. But that optimism of starting and owning your own business is something that's really fundamental to our economy. And there is a network of assistance out there. And I guess that's what I want people to understand. If you have an idea about a business, or if your business is struggling, there is now a network of organizations that have kind of lined up and are trying to learn how to work together and refer entities to each other, depending on what their strengths are. And that's everything from WSU small business development centers to our small business resiliency network at Commerce, where we help provide support to organizations who then provide support to small businesses and entrepreneurs, sometimes language translation, again, connecting them to state and federal resources. That network has been strengthened during the pandemic, and hopefully we've we've learned a good lesson not to take for granted how we all have to work together if we're really going to create kind of a safety net for business in our region.
There is that sense of optimism, and there's also, as you said, the exhaustion. And small business owners have told us, and to your point of those partnerships strengthening, is the accessibility to help, to support, to resources, and specifically to grants, is that going to continue? Are we going to see more money for our small businesses at a state and federal level to bolster that what they've come through, and now they're being hit again with this latest wave, and there's that fear, there's that PTSD. Oh gosh, we've been here before. And some of them have told us, and some of the grant money is out, or I go online and it says, this program is done. Will they see more?
There will be more. There, in addition to the local resources, and I want to hand it to Spokane County that just convened, Commissioner Cooney just convened local electeds and the smaller cities within our county together, because there is those American Rescue Plan dollars that there are still there to be allocated. That won't last forever, but it is a source of support for business and other important needs in our community, like housing, for the next few years. Commerce will be doing another round of Working Washington small business grants. And we're also partnering with financial institutions on credit, because that's a piece too. We've got a lot of businesses out there that are have established banking relationships and credit, but we have others that aren't there yet. And so we've been able to create a new fund called the Small Business Flex Fund. And these are grants that are on very favorable terms, and they can go to businesses that may not have the best credit record established at this point. And we were able to use public money, and now private money is coming in. The public money will kind of guarantee, provide sort of the backing for the loans, and then the private capital is there to circulate in our community. So I would encourage businesses that are floundering or starting up to really check out that network of support. And it's not just one door, just go in any door, and hopefully we are working together closely enough that we can help direct you in the right place. So go to DSP if you're downtown, go to GSI or Commerce, and we will try to get that business or entrepreneur connected.
When you talk about another round of those small business grants and that Flex Fund, is that currently active, or is that, what's the expectation date?
The Flex Fund is active, and we just got additional capital yesterday from Umpqua Bank, and so that is active. It's you can go on our website right now and get that information. We've got financial partners making those loans all over the state, and I think over $27 million has already gone out, but there's much more available. The Working Washington grants, we're going to wait till after the legislative session to see what the focus, in case the legislature wants to focus our efforts in a certain place, and also to know just how large the funding's going to be. The governor has put it in his budget proposal and asked for another $20 million for the arts, for example. We'll see what the legislature does by the end of March, or hopefully by the middle of March, when the session is scheduled to end.
Are you hopeful that those are going to play out as requested?
I am. Actually, I am. I think there's bipartisan support. It's been across the state. We did one targeted round, for example, recently to border area businesses, and Spokane wasn't eligible, but our border areas were: Ferry, Stevens, Pend Oreille, Okanagan, et cetera. And I'm pretty confident that the legislature will include significant funds for another grant round in the next budget.
And that would include the Spokane area having access?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And we'll be utilizing partners like GSI to get the word out. We also have a group of smaller organizations that are working in specific arenas, many with historically disadvantaged businesses. Mm-hmm. You may have heard of AHANA, that is a multi-ethnic business association. SIMBA, that works with some of our particularly local organizations, the Martin Luther King Center, providing technical assistance to Black-owned businesses. They are also on contract to connect businesses to the resources when they're available, whether it's federal or state.
I want to touch on something, if you don't mind, Lisa, that you just mentioned a minute ago, and I think it's really important for our viewers to know. Number one, you talked about the commissioners convening the meeting, where not only I think we're seeing the collaboration amongst groups like ours, we're also seeing it amongst our elected officials. And so having them convening in that council of governments amongst themselves to collaborate, but then also having them invite the business community in to hear their thoughts and their perspective. And so kudos to Alisha and Lance from Spokane Valley Chamber for helping to facilitate that discussion. But I just want to encourage our viewers, especially if you're an entrepreneur or a small business owner, is to also make sure there's $200+ million, that our local jurisdictions have, that they are in the process of building plans for distribution as well, Laura. And so I think it's really important for our local community to reach out to our elected officials, take them up on this offer, frankly, which is we want to hear from you. Our elected officials want to hear from them. What's important? What do we see as what would be catalytic investments that by partnering together, these jurisdictions could make, generational, hopefully economic impact for our region. But they need to hear from us what we think those priorities are. So that's just another great sign. Like you say, sometimes crisis forces us to work a little bit more closely together. I know the business community did that, the community at large did that, and we're certainly seeing that amongst our elected officials.
And we're going to celebrate. I do want to talk about some of the wins over the past year or so. You said something about 200 million. What is this 200 million referencing becoming available?
Yeah, so you guys could correct me on the actual number, but those are ARPA funds that local jurisdictions have received and have. I think the city for sure has begun a first round of distribution on those funds. Putting out into the community for initiatives and or projects. I think they're still, as they're building those plans, they're trying to keep one ear to the federal level and make sure that they're understanding what those rules and guidelines will be. But ultimately we'll be distributing those monies out, whether that would be for infrastructure projects or to organizations that might be just like they did in the past, like ours, who are directly connected with economic development. Those kinds of investments. And so those will be, I think the timeline, if I recall, is the next 2.5 years, I think. Are we 6 months into this, I think? So about 2.5 years they have to distribute those funds. That's a big pool of money that could have a very positive impact on the region.
Yeah, and keep in mind that Congress passed the Infrastructure and Jobs Act and IIJA. And it's a little confusing, I just have to say, if you don't have all the numbers straight, there's a reason for that. And that's because the way our system works, we've got federal dollars coming, and sometimes they go directly to the cities, the largest cities in the counties. Sometimes they come through the state, and then the state then passes them through Commerce and other state agencies. So for example, back when we had the American Rescue Plan, that was $7 billion to the state and $1.9 billion coming through Commerce in terms of rental assistance, and we're doing broadband work, and we're doing small business assistance and other things. So I guess the good news is I think there are resources for the next few years for us to take on some of these tough issues. We all know we need more housing and more affordable housing, more housing at all levels. We do need broadband for everyone, right? Because just imagine with broadband and childcare, people are learning you can work from home if you've got a safe place for your kids and you've got enough download speed to do what you need to do. And so this is a good time for collaboration and partnerships, and for us to figure out as a community. I've got my Commerce hat on, but I'll take it off and put my Spokane hat on. As a community, let's figure out how we pull down as much of that state and federal competitive grant money for broadband and housing as we can, because we know we have those needs.
How do we do that? How do we position ourselves competitively? We always are looking for our fair share of the grab, right? and
Well,
don't
I think
always
like
feel
Mark
like we get it.
said, the collaboration of the local governments, everybody in, this isn't just these aren't just city issues or county issues, right? It's all of us. And then relying on the private sector to do what it can do and nonprofits to do what they can do. That is the magic formula for being as competitive as possible when it comes to the statewide piece. And then I'll just say it's our commitment as the Department of Commerce to make state programs as regionally equitable as possible. And that is something, that I think obviously the governor and the legislature want us to do. It doesn't always happen if you don't pay close attention to it, right? Because, we're farther away from the major population of the King County area, but also the political center of Olympia. And so our collaboration is really important to make sure that we are stepping up whenever there is a competition and getting our applications in for the grants.
So I do want to take a moment. Love Local is celebrating some of the wins, and you brought up Terrain, and it's one of the businesses or the nonprofit and the From Here business connected with that we're featuring. So there have been some wins. There has been some really celebratory moments that we're sharing on this show. Any that you want to share?
There's like so many, it's hard to
I know, look it. I'm like, hey, brag a little, and you guys are all stunned.
Well, I would pick up on some of the work, the influence of, we can look around our communities and I look at the dollars that we had the ability to work with Commerce on to distribute, and then dollars to work with the county and multiple partners across the region to infuse into these small businesses. We have so many of them who their doors are still open. And then we also have, from a GSI perspective, we're excited. While we're doing all of that, we also, working with Commerce, just had a win on the expansion of Carbon Quest out in the Spokane Valley. So companies that are doing really important and innovative clean technology and energy related stuff right here in Spokane. It's kind of this combination of both these dollars to continue to help stabilize our small business economy and dollars to help businesses like Carbon Quest be able to continue to expand their operations here in the region. And that's just one here over the last couple of weeks. So it's just exciting to see the combination and the innovation that's taking part. And then I know Mark has some great, they've been highlighting, and Mark may want to speak to it, but some of the companies that have also started up during this time, that's something we are trying not to lose track of as well, because the innovation has spurred both continued, but also new companies and new ideas here in the region. And so they've been able to highlight some of that as well, which has been awesome.
Well, so let me just speak to that briefly, because I'd like one of you two to, because I always get this number wrong, but one of the wins, in my opinion, is this stat that I think I heard from either you, Alisha, or Lance, about where we stood, I think, at the end of the year in terms of being second, I think, only to one county as far as the net fewest loss of businesses in the state of Washington in terms of counties, if I'm remembering that correctly. But for downtown, we've seen somewhere between 17 and 22 new businesses launch or in some stage of launching since COVID. So what, not only is that just like inspirational, it just gives me the chills just to think about, Lisa, you mentioned it earlier, when we think about the passion and I call it grit. But when you see that taking place in the midst of a crisis, people are forging ahead, and they're launching their dream. And what we're seeing is a net positive in downtown, believe it or not, in terms of business development. We're also seeing outside developers having interest and contacting us probably more frequently than they have in recent past, and buildings being purchased and converted. Some very positive things there. But I don't know if either one of you two could recall that stat. I'm guessing you could, because I think that's a huge win for the region.
Do you know the statistic, Alisha? I was going to go on to some other, I think, exciting developments.
Yeah, go right ahead. But that's the right statistic. We were seeing, working with all of that we had, which has helped our recovery in some ways, because we had a lot of more dollars infused into the region combination of state and federal funds that allowed us to our small businesses to both kind of move through and reopen faster than other parts of the state.
Yeah, so big picture, I think the Spokane economy could have been characterized a couple of decades back as having, say, the Kaiser aluminum manufacturing and being an agricultural center for the region. And of course, we've always been a healthcare center. But where are we now? We're at a place where we really have these clusters of economic activity, and we want to build on those clusters. So we now have a life science and health science cluster in Spokane, and we have some good things happening there. We have startups that are occurring in that space, in health science and in telehealth. We have expansion of Jubilant Hollister Steer in northeast Spokane. That's pharmaceutical manufacturing. We've got an aerospace cluster that is very active. We've got a tech cluster that's evolving and growing, and again, we have these small businesses. I would say, while we're still an agriculture service center, we also understand that there's the maker economy, and people love the locally made products and services that come out of ag, whether that's the wine, and I have a couple of wineries nearby in my neighborhood, wine tasting facilities, or it's craft beer and distilleries, or it's spiceology and the success that they're having in that space. So I kind of think of that as the maker space. Mm-hmm. And in some ways, terrain is part of that, right? Because it's artisans and crafts, and it's things that are locally made. And that's a pretty exciting space. And consumers are really, people like it a lot. They like to have things that were made locally or nearby. And we can both stimulate our local economy, but then we can start to export those things outside the region as well, and that's good for us.
Well,
directly related to that, and I know both of you have some role in this to some extent, but is just the growth that, again, our listeners I think need to understand too, which is the access to capital. I think in Spokane for startup and for growth businesses, Spiceology is a great example. I think they just took down $7 or $10 million in growth seed capital, and that's kind of a little bit unheard of, if you will. If you go back to Lisa's example 10, 15 years ago, right? Having that, so like organizations like Ignite Spokane, Ignite Northwest, organizations that are specifically focused on connecting entrepreneurs with startup capital is I think grown in Spokane over the last 10, 15 years like it's never been before. So that's a great resource and something we should be proud of and celebrate in our community.
And then the creative economy is also really happening here, and we have films being filmed, movies being made, and I believe the legislature, Rep Marcus Riccelli's been very engaged. I think we're going to expand that film tax incentive, and that'll be great for our area. And so the creative sector is another one that I think I have a lot of optimism for, and it's an opportunity too. And an opportunity for young people, sometimes from diverse or historically disadvantaged backgrounds, to get into an industry that is exciting and can utilize both their youth and creativity.
And now it's a matter too of getting the workers and the infrastructure to support that here in Eastern Washington, correct?
Yeah, I think obviously our educational institutions have a big role to play there, and it's a question of creating those pathways that are responsive to employers. And I know GSI has been involved and Commerce has been involved with a program that the Association for Washington Business is putting forward. It's a remote worker program. And the idea there, if anyone is interested, is if you do have broadband, you can get the skills to potentially be a remote worker for a major tech company that may be located on the west side. We don't, I think there's a churn and a change going on among some of our big tech companies with the realization that maybe their workforce doesn't have to live in downtown Seattle, and that they may be able to have workers all over the state, and that is certainly beneficial for us.
Well, I suppose there's been a shift in paradigm, right, in terms of working and remote and all of that. So certainly, I suppose we want to call it a benefit or a positive to come out of the last 18 months.
Oh, I think it absolutely is. I mean, not only just like all this huge pipeline of education that these two have been working on for over a decade, right? And others, but so growing our own talent. But then at the same time, we're seeing this incredible net immigration that we've never seen, frankly, in my lifetime in Spokane, and where individuals like Lisa talked about are realizing they can live in an amazing place like Spokane, Washington, where we have all of this natural beauty. And they can still have a very successful career, and I think that's one facet of it. Another piece that I just want to share that I think is part of what we do, because I think this is really important, is keeping and retaining our talent and attracting new talent. I think requires that we have the kind of creative economy that Lisa speaks to, but also just to the cultural amenities and the cultural diversity that we have seen explode in Spokane in the last decade, frankly. So the growth in the different segments of the arts and in turn is for like the things that we do as far as like hosting and supporting a variety of different events. One of the things we just recently did is we launched a new grant to support minority emphasized events. So people that want to bring or grow an event to celebrate cultural diversity or celebrate some unique aspect of the community. And what we saw was an overwhelming response. And so what we're going to see over the next couple of years as a result of that, our board is committed to continuing that funding. We're going to just see really just more and more access to the beauty of these different cultures. That's not only important for us because that's what makes us whole, but it also is going to attract and retain the talent, because that's what most people want, right? They want to have that wonderful vibe without the crazy traffic, and Spokane has become that place.
And I would just add on the worker front that I think we have there are a couple of big opportunities for us, right? So as we're attracting the talent to the community, how do we also then transition that talent into connecting to the opportunities that exist here in Spokane? Mm-hmm. And that's part of this, like, we've been growing businesses, and we have lots of small and medium-sized businesses that are doing really cool things. And we have some work to do to help people know who those companies are and the opportunities that are here in Spokane. And reversely, the talent that we're preparing, I mean, we can't lose sight. We're preparing a ton of talent here in the Spokane region between our colleges and universities, and Spokane's grown up and changed so much. And so how do we make sure that they're connecting to those opportunities here versus believing that they need to go elsewhere? Because we've built so much of the creative economy and opportunities for things that people were seeking in other communities prior. And so a lot of opportunity in that, which is exciting. You guys got to connect the talent to those opportunities. And then at the same time, and Lisa brought this up at the beginning of the conversation, but we certainly have a huge segment of our workforce that's still sitting, on the sidelines or not working at full capacity because of the continued childcare challenges, both access and availability, the continued need to balance schooling of our children. And so as those things, as we move through the pandemic, some of those things both stabilize and we're able to get more services available, we have a whole group of talent that we're going to need to work to bring back in. And there's some really cool opportunities for that. And so I think those are things I'm optimistic about and excited to partner with a lot of folks on as we think about talent attraction and retention and re-engagement. There's
a lot of fear right now in this particular moment, and we do live moment by moment anymore. And there's a lot of fear. How do you combat that legitimate panic button in our business sector, in our workers, and our families at this moment?
I think people have a reason to be cautious and careful. Big shout out to everybody in the healthcare field and to our first responders. Agreed. And our teachers, obviously, who've just had to take on so much of the uncertainty and of the extra work that has come during the pandemic, but I believe we will turn the corner on the pandemic. We will ultimately be able to have big gatherings again. I have gathering in my background. That was obviously pre-pandemic, but we will be able to have that happen again. And when it does, we're going to be ready for it, right? So big, fun, exciting things for people like Bloomsday and Hoop Fest and soccer and great outdoor and indoor recreation and sports activities in this community. And I don't want to minimize that this is also a challenging time in terms of social divisions and political divisions and, you know, reckoning with the historical divisions. I mean, that is real. We have Washington State sadly has some of the lowest statistics in the country for Black families owning homes. So we have to keep taking on those issues, and they're real and they're hard. But on the other hand, we have this amazing outdoor and environment, and I do think we have partnerships. And if we can just keep rebuilding trust and communication, I think we can really move forward as a region.
Well,
another thing that I think is really important when we talk about concern or fear is you know, there's been discussion about a commitment, but just frankly, from our perspective, because my team is out there on the street right this minute on the front line, it is working to keep our streets safe and keep them clean. We need to follow the discussion with action for ramping up our investment in taking care of our folks suffering from mental illness and from addiction, because these not only already were crises in our country, but they've just been exacerbated, right, by these fears and by the isolation that we've been experiencing over the last 2 years. And I know there's been some great efforts in that, but clearly there is a greater need right now than there is resource. And so that's an area where I think as a community we need to really focus in some energy and some resource to really own what it is we're talking about. We all understand this is an issue. Let's find that collaboration and address it like we tackle so many things so well in Spokane.